problems, but we began to find these spikes. And it began to tell me that somebody somewhere was beginning to use inordinate amounts of arsenic, barium, aluminum, calcium, manganese, magnesium, and that all of these things, lead, iron, were all spiking at the same time. How can you have them spiking in the same time across the entire state of California when prior to the 1990s, and they were testing for these chemicals prior to the 1990s, that they weren't showing up in water systems at all, or they weren't spiking. And all of a sudden, way over state and federal standards, we found this data. A friend of mine took and graphed every single water district, every single piece of data. And we now have a graphing program so we can look at any water system in California, and we can determine if they were spiking in unison with any other water system across the state of California. It took 300 hours to write a program to do this. Monumental chore to do, but we now have it, and we can show you the graphs. We can show you the actual water data from the state and show that these are unusual spikes. My job then began to go and look at graphs that were provided by the California Air Resources Board. And what we discovered is that the spiking from the California Air Resources Board air tests were also spiking in the same years and at the same time, and coordinated with the spikings of the water supply, which led us to believe that this was something that was airborne and had to be hitting us from the air. Now, the California Air Resources Board did do a number of tests to see if any of these chemicals over time, and they weren't doing it because of us, they were doing it out of curiosity, but they did run some tests to see if any of these chemicals were coming over from China. And what they found is, if it wasn't in any great quantity, and for the most part here in Mendocino County, where they had one test site, there wasn't anything coming over. So that led me to believe that it had to be over us. Something had to be happening that was happening here versus maybe somewhere else coming in from the Pacific. So that set me off to look at government documents on these chemicals, how dangerous they were, where they were being used, factories, everything. And what I found out was that we were having these spikes here, and we have no industry between the Pacific Ocean and Hawaii and where we are here in Mendocino County. There wasn't any industry, and the few industries that were small and weren't consequential because they didn't release anything that would look like the massive amounts of lead and iron and barium would not be coming from those particular plants. Professor Gregory Benford in 2006 was on KNBC and interviewed on television in Burbank, California. And what happened is he said that you can mix aluminum and barium and you can make clouds, and that he saw it coming that they would be able to put these clouds where they wanted them to do what they wanted to with them. And he's part of the geoengineering group that I was present at when they had that meeting at NASA Ames. The second thing is that I started to look at other programs that the government was doing, atmospheric testing programs, other things, not related to the jets. And I began to find that these chemicals were being shot up on the space shuttle and shot up on rockets, and that they would send canisters packed with sulfur hexafluoride, which is a man-made chemical which exacerbates global warming, barium, aluminum, trimethyl aluminum, strontium, lithium, and they would send the canisters up, release them at different levels in the atmosphere, and to do ionospheric testing, they would superheat them until they exploded, and then they would do these chemical reactions, much like explosions you would see from light shows and things like that. You'd have this big explosion, and then you would go through and these chemicals would blow up and intermix. So the barium, I began to think that were these coordinating, these atmospheric tests, were they coordinating with the spikes in California and other areas? And I believe that from some of the data that I looked at, trying to correspond the dates of the tests, when they were done, and also the water